Good morning. So I know that in 10 days' time you have your exams and project deadlines, but Varunji, we are a different kind of university. Yesterday I had their class till 11 o'clock in the night. I started at 9 and went on till 11. There is another program which is happening right now. So, but our students are very keen to hear you, and they have a huge respect for you and the kind of write-ups you are writing. Varun doesn't need any introduction, as you have been following his op-eds. He studied at University of London, has written 2 collections of poems, and they have been the bestseller. Recently, he has written 2 articles which many of us discussed here on rural distress and on salary hike of legislators. Being himself a legislator, somebody saying don't hike our salaries 400% or 500% requires some kind of courage. He has been MP of the constituency of his mother and also presently MP from the constituency of his father. In 2012, he became the youngest General Secretary of BJP in the history of BJP. He is the only member of parliament who spends entire 100% of MP local area fund. Most MPs don't spend even this kind of money on their constituencies. And he donates his entire salary to the farmers in UP who had to commit suicide due to agricultural distress. Even though his agriculture minister of his party says that these farmers are committing suicide due to failed love affairs. So he takes a position different from his party. He had also offered Anna Hazare when he was arrested that when he was denied permission to have an agitation in Delhi, to have an agitation from his official residence. But Varun is a controversial person. So he takes very different kind of positions. So there was a hate speech, not 1 but 2 cases against him early in his career. Some 51 prosecution witnesses did not indict him, and a Muslim judge acquitted him in both the cases. His party took the position that in one of the rallies of the Prime Minister, at that time he was not the Prime Minister, in West Bengal, there were 2 lakh people, and Varun from nowhere came and said, no, there were only 50,000 people. Similarly, Varun introduced a bill on recall of MPs, that if MPs or MLAs are not going to their constituencies, if people have developed a kind of distrust in them, then people should have a right to recall their MPs. As you know, in many European countries, you have such a provision. Of course, his party and even opposition will not agree to it, but he had the courage to come up with that kind of bill. And then his being in a rightist party, his leftward ideological turn causes problems to him and to many others. But here is a man who has a mind of his own, a young politician. In my opinion, what is UP's loss is national gain, and one day he is going to lead us and lead this nation. Varun, NALSAR is the best law school in the country, in my opinion. On most parameters, we have done better than other institutions, and you have as many as 21 national law universities. We are, if Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said in Vigyan Bhavan once, that in a sea of mediocrity, you have few islands of excellence. So we are one such island of excellence. And the number of students in this hall may be small to the big gatherings you address, yet they have a huge impact because the kind of the institution we are and the kind of students we have here. So I'm sure we are going to have quite an interesting discussion. He is going to speak on what kind of political reforms we should have. Because, you know, many of us are increasingly believing that even when you bring a party with a difference to power, there is hardly any difference. As Arun Shourie said, it is Congress plus cow, one may disagree with Arun Shori, but whether you get X party or Y party, nothing really changes on ground. So what kind of political reforms India should consider at this point of time? That is the topic on which Varun Gandhi is going to speak. On behalf of my students and teachers and colleagues, I extend a very warm welcome to you, and floor is all yours.
You know, I've been really ill for the last week. I couldn't talk. I had such a horrible cough. So if I am inaudible, please excuse me. You know, Faizan Saab, who's a great hero of mine and one of the most important liberal voices in our country now, called me Varun Gandhi. You know, till I was about 21, 22, I never used the word Varun because my name is Firoz Varun Gandhi. So anybody who knows me calls me Firoz. And when I fought my election, there was a person who fought against me called Varun Gandhi. Somebody had put him up and he got 26,000 votes. So I will always dislike the name Varun Gandhi hence. Thank you for having me here at this most prestigious institution. The talk today is not about what reforms to institute in India. The talk today is about what reforms to institute full stop in this global body politic. So the world today seems to be undergoing a complete upending of the traditional political syntax. You have the shocking election of Donald Trump, the strange case of Brexit, the bizarre election of Macron, etc., all over the world. We just saw what happened in Catalonia. One of the trends that we can identify is a revolt by the working classes worldwide against the traditional elite structure of politics. There is a feeling all over the world that globalization has left many people without a fair share, without an equal chance at gentrification, economically, socially, culturally. And these people are now fighting back through their vote. This disaffection, this chasm has been exploited by politicians. It has been exploited in the form of bigotry. Whether you see the rhetoric of Trump or the rhetoric of many other politicians, you saw Duterte in the Philippines, etc. What you've seen is the amplification of the other, whether it is the Muslim, the Jew, the immigrant, the outsider. It is that other that is to blame for joblessness, for poverty, for urban squalor, etc., etc., etc. And because this seems to be working, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No, these guys have to eat as well, you know, so it's occupational hazard. So really, where are these political systems going? How can we make politics more equitable? How can we make it more accessible? That is the challenge of our times. We had the American elections not too far ago behind, and one of the things that I saw was the extreme emergence of super PACs or super political action committees. The second richest family in America, the first being the Walmart family, is the Koch brothers, K-O-C-H, who are also the biggest climate change deniers in the world, strangely enough. And they spent $889 million on the election, trying to make Donald Trump win, after spending $90 million trying to make him lose in the primaries, only in America. And the strange thing is, what are super PACs? So super PACs were made in a Supreme Court ruling, Citizens United versus FEC, where it was mandated that you could legally take unlimited amounts of money from corporations, associations, individuals, unions, etc. The amount of money that was spent on the American election, all told, exceeds $10 billion. That is a frighteningly large sum of money. But today, one of the things that we see before us is people like you, young people, are not willing to view corruption as a mere externality of the political system. It's not business as usual. You look at the example of Brazil. Dilma Rousseff had a very good image, actually, until the Petrobras scandal erupted. And her party, which is ironically called the Workers' Party, was found to take over $5 billion from Petrobras, which is the petroleum company. And 60% of the MPs had taken money directly from the company, and their names were found in the ledgers. And of course, she resigned, and that was the end of her career. But it wasn't just business as usual. This wouldn't happen in Latin America 20 years ago. When we saw you, Faizan Sahab spoke about Anna Hazare, saying that I offered his house. Faizan Sahab, I didn't just offer him my house. I'm the only MP that went and sat in that agitation. And I didn't sit on the dais. I just went and sat like a normal person, just to show that I, supported that whole movement. I still do. But the point is, how can we make this system more equitable? Atal Bihari Vajpayee said famously that every politician starts his career with a lie. And that lie is how much money he spent to get elected. So technically, an MLA spends between 20 and 28 lakhs, and a member of parliament can spend between 54 to 70 lakhs. But what you're not told is that political parties can spend unlimited amounts at election time. So really, it's a very skewed form of political expenditure, which ensures that no middle class or poor person can ever fight elections anymore. According to the Association for Democratic Reforms, ADR, donations for political parties in the last 10 years have risen 5,200 times. 5,200%. So 52 times. In the last election, national parties received 1,860 crores worth of donations. And let's be honest, the BSP and the CPM did not garner the lion's share. What can be done about this? So in America, 2 states, Maine and Arizona, have created clean energy commissions, So what they do basically is it's an attempt at direct public funding of elections. Australia has direct funding of elections. To some extent, Germany has direct public funding of elections. But you have to get a certain amount of votes to avail of that direct public funding. It could be 3%, it could be 5%. In some provinces, it's up to 10%. So that really doesn't create an equal playing field for a person who's fresh off the boat into political reform. In America, the states that have created clean election commissions have said that for the post of governor, which is like a chief minister in India, you need 15,000 signatures or 15,000 quoted donations of $5 each, which is not difficult, but it's not that easy if you're not known. In Norway, actually, there's a very curious case of how to regulate election expenditure. They don't regulate it at all. You can spend whatever you want, you can get whatever you want, you can raise whatever you want, but there's no way you can spend it. There's no billboards, there's no advertising on TV, there's no advertising on radio, there's no advertising in newspapers. You cannot have more than 2 cars roaming around doing election work in a constituency, otherwise you will be debarred. And you cannot address an audience of more than 100 people. So it encourages you to go door-to-door campaigning, which is actually what should be done everywhere. Because you can't buy influence in Norway. In India, sadly, the scales are not exactly tipped equally. Technically in India, there is a provision that you get a certain amount of free time on public broadcasting. But let's be honest, who watches public broadcasting? When was the last time you watched Doordarshan or DD Kisan? Which is the channel I watch all the time. So can we have a system? Come, why don't you sit on the chair? It's about time that ladies occupy high office. राजनीति में कोई अपनी कुर्सी दूसरे को देता नहीं है, तो आपको तो बहुत खुश होना चाहिए. Can we have free broadcasting time on private channels, on radios? One of the biggest problems is the problem of the Election Commission, which is really a toothless tiger. So the Article 324 of the Constitution says it controls and supervises elections, but does it really? Does it really do that? It doesn't have the power to file cases once the election is over. It has to go to the Supreme Court to do so. There are 814 million Indian voters. The total budget for the Election Commission in the election of 2014 was 594 crores. In Sweden, the budget for the Election Commission was double, with 7 million voters. So you can understand what kind of penetration the Election Commission really can have. What about transparency guidelines? So parties are required to transparently display how much money they've raised from individual donations. Mayawati ji's party famously said that it had got over 1,000 crores from people giving 2 rupees and 5 rupees and 8 rupees, but it didn't have the names of any of those people. So they have no binding authority in law. Can it be codified in the Representation of People's Act 1951? It should be. The Election Commission has never de-recognized any political party in India for filing late expenditure reports. Almost all national political parties overshot limits by a year, up to 2.5 years. The only party that's ever been de-recognized was late Shri P.A. Sangmaji's party, NPP, the National Political Party, strangely named, which then submitted its expenditure, and one day later it was recognized again. So really, if there's no penalization, let's look at the drawback of coalition politics. India has suffered from this for years and years and years. Can we have a system of proportional representation in our country? So Poland, New Zealand, Germany have 5% proportional representation. That if you get 5%, you have seats in parliament. Italy, actually, which was suffering from coalition politics really badly, they had 7 governments in 10 years. So Matteo Renzi said, we will get a new constitution passed. So now it's 3%, 40% of the lead candidates are women, and if you get 40% of the vote nationally, you automatically get a majority. But in India, it's complicated. See, in Turkey, Erdogan had 10% proportional representation, which is too high, which means if you get 9.9% of the vote, you get no seat in parliament. And this year, they're increasing it to 20%, which is basically a recipe for dictatorship. That if you get 18% of the country to vote for you, you don't get 1 seat in parliament, there's something wrong with that system. My fear about proportional representation, it's very fancy and it's very in vogue to say that you support this, is that what will happen to J&K? What will happen to Mizoram? What will happen to Meghalaya? Because will they then not be on the ballot? Because can Mizoram get a member of parliament in a country which says that you need 5% proportional representation? No. Frankly, you won't get anybody. Or you will get people from that state, but they will be people appointed by national parties. There will be no regional leadership of these states. And if you don't have regional leadership of states, if regional aspirations are not met, it could have disastrous consequences going forward. So proportional representation, I'm on the fence about that. What about increasing political accountability? See, the problem with the political class today is that they're hardly accountable to anybody. Let's be honest. Most of you or all of you know the Lily Thomas versus Union of India case. That if you could get convicted of a serious wrongdoing of more than 2 years, you automatically get disqualified from whatever position you hold. But I remember in 2013, in the Rajya Sabha, the then government moved a representation of people's Second Amendment and Validation Bill to overrule this, to protect a person whose judgment of the fodder scam was coming, a person that shall go unnamed. But public pressure was such that it was overruled. What about right to recall? So in England, you have right to recall, and actually it's pretty easy to recall somebody in England because you just need 10% of the population of that constituency to do it. In India, you would have everybody getting recalled, starting with me, if that was the case. But you need to be convicted or charged of a serious wrongdoing in England to have your name up for right to recall. Interestingly, nobody's ever been recalled. See, it begs a fundamental question. What is the role of the electorate? Is the electorate a person that goes to press a button once in 5 years? Or are the electorate the guardians of democracy? This is a basic difference in how you view democracy. I moved a right to recall bill, as you said. In fact, my bill was very stringent. It was actually done in a much more strict way so that the right to recall can't happen. My bill was that it has to be signed by 25% of the electorate. The signatures have to be verified. And finally, when the election is held, you need to be voted out by 3/4 of the amount of people that have voted for you. But even then, most members of parliament felt that it would lead to them being in some sort of hot water, so it was junked. You talked about the MP salaries thing. You know how it happened actually, Professor? I was going to see my mother, and there were all these Tamilnadu farmers. My mother lives near Jantar Mantar, which is actually the fulcrum of democracy in India, because every day you find about 50 different groups agitating there. And you must go and see it if you're ever in Delhi. It's lots of fun. It's also very horrifying. And I saw these farmers, and because I had been working with farmers for a long time in UP, I stopped and I noticed that they had skulls of farmers that had committed suicide next to them. They were also drinking their own urine in protest. But nobody had really gone to meet them, to sit with them, so I sat with them. I took up the matter in Parliament. And why did I take it up? Not because they're farmers that were agitating. They're farmers agitating in some part of the country for the last thousands of years. I did it because the Tamilnadu Assembly called a special session, an all-day debate. And I, like everyone else, thought they were doing it to debate the farmers' problem. But no, it was an all-day session to give themselves a 200% salary hike. I found that really vulgar. And I found that terribly insensitive, that when in the national capital you have your farmers of your state sitting and drinking their own urine, you're giving yourself a double salary hike. And I spoke about it in Parliament. I moved a bill. See, my point is not that MPs' salaries shouldn't be increased or that MPs shouldn't be paid well. There is a very cogent school of thought which believes if you pay people badly, you get mediocre people. And that's a legitimate argument. My argument is this. One, can you arrogate to yourself the power to increase your salary at will? Can anybody do that? Does any other country have that? No. You should have a constitutional authority that decides whether you've done good work, what are your standard of living, what are your costs of living, what are the costs, additional costs of being a legislator, and then adjudicate whether or not you should get a salary hike. Members of Parliament have increased their salary 4 times in the last 5 years. Has the work been of extraordinary eminence and scholarship? No comment. But I will say, I will flag 2 or 3 issues. One, Parliament worked between 1952 and 1972, 135 days a year. In the last 15 years, Parliament has worked an average of 62 days a year. 2, 61% of all laws that have been passed in Parliament have not been discussed for a single second in Parliament. 3, 68% of all laws that have been passed in Parliament have been sent to no parliamentary standing or consultative committee in the last 15 years. So if Parliament is not an arena of deliberation, then what is Parliament? I think it begs the question. So my point was not to target parties or people. I don't believe in criticizing people individually. But I do believe that questions need to be asked in a democracy, dissenting or otherwise. Parliamentarians will often tell you, we're public representatives. We've won elections. How can you question us? हम तो चुनाव जीत के आए हैं भैया. How representative are politicians really? Farooq Saab just won from Srinagar. He just won a by-election. Do you know how many votes he got from the people of Srinagar? 4.1%. Is he representative of everybody there? Chandrasekhar Dubey won as an MLA in Jharkhand. He got 10.9% because 10 people fought absolutely neck to neck. Ravneet Singh Bittu fought in the same election, got elected as me 2014, got 24% of the vote. Why should I talk about other people? Let me talk about myself. In this election, I did not get 50% of the vote. Does that mean that only my voice counts for that constituency? The day I won the election, in my second election, the first thing I did was I called up everybody that fought against me. And I said, look, my vision is not the only vision that should count in this constituency. You've probably got equally, if not better, ideas about this constituency. So you may not want to come to me for political reasons, but आप किसी के घर पे खाना रख लीजिए. Keep food at somebody's house, I'll come there. Let all of us sit and talk. Give me your memorandums for this constituency. Let me do all of your work. So all this constituency represented, not just this 40% that I claim to represent. In India, we don't really know what our leaders represent. In Argentina, there is a reform that they passed called Cambiemos, let's change, which is basically that even for a local representative, like an MLA or an MP, you have compulsory electoral debates which are broadcast on television. Now what happens is, you get to know the caliber of a leader, you get to know what they know and don't know. I'll be honest with you, if all constituencies in India could quiz their leaders, a lot of people who are getting elected wouldn't get elected. There's something to think about. What about representation of women? I just wrote an article on yesterday in the Hindustan Times on women's reservation, backing it. Everybody's always talking about women's reservation, but they only forget women once, which is when they're giving tickets for the election. So how many women are there in parliament? Then 11%. And how many women are there in state assemblies? They're 9%. And it's not like women lost. They just weren't given tickets. 14% of women got tickets. The most important thing where parliament is concerned is to make it a space for policy, not a space for politics. And one of the ways, or two of the ways you can do that is, one, give people the freedom to vote their conscience, not just vote their party. And I'll tell you what I mean. There are some issues of national security, there are some issues of ideological importance where parties should vote as one. I agree with this. But those are about 5%. For 95% of issues, what am I told as an MP? Come to parliament and press the green button or press the red button. But half the time I don't even know why I'm pressing it. I don't even know what law I'm passing. This is not a healthy sign. In America, and in most countries, you have individual voting records. So you get to know, is this person pro-homosexuality, same-sex marriage? Is he pro-gun control? Is he liberal? Is he pro-labor? Is he pro-farmer? But in India, you really don't know about any individual MP because every single law is accompanied by a 3-line party whip. So you're told, go here, press a button, come out. That shouldn't be. There should be a public voting record. There should be an open data platform, and you should be able to see what your legislators are doing and whether they reflect your views or not. We are desperately short of adding to the body of knowledge in general. Why is that? Because I'm given 25,000 rupees for research. But an American senator gets $1 million a year. And if he's head of a particular select committee, a staff of 60 people, let's be honest, for 25,000 rupees, I can't really hire a PhD, can I? Well, maybe in today's job environment I can, but normally I can't. I'm sorry to break it to you. The Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha have a total budget of 1,050 crores. House of Representatives and the Senate combined have a budget of $2 billion. Actually, sorry, $5.2 billion. There's no comparison. So when you say, oh, but in the British Parliament they debate so well, it's because they have 50 people briefing them. And they can ask them, okay, can you tell me what I should say? Okay, I agree with that, I don't agree with that. And finally, this is my considered view. But if with the rough and tumble of constituency politics, party politics, trying to stay alive, if you have, adding to the body of knowledge autodidacticism, how can you do that? It doesn't add up. I went to the library of the US Congress. 600 people work there. 600 policy analysts. A labor analyst, an agriculture analyst, an analyst on women's affairs. 600 people. You just go there and you ask them, listen, can you tell me about this? I don't know much about it. I have to speak on this issue. There are people who've done PhDs from Harvard and Yale and NALSAR. And they go and they tell you, they say, this is our view. If you go to the library in Parliament, it's completely empty. Inclusive politics. For too long in our country, inclusive politics has just been about religion, region, and caste. So in Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew realized that every constituency was Han Chinese dominant. So he made group representative constituencies, GRCs, where he said that in 13 out of 89 constituencies, the lead candidate will be a minority person. Could be a Malay, could be Tamil, could be Sikh, could be anybody. And it worked quite well. I have a different take on this. See, I fight elections from UP. West UP is completely agriculture dominant. East UP is bunkar dominant, weaver dominant. Bhadoi, Machli Shahar, Banaras, Allahabad, that area. Can't we segregate? Can't we have a real farmer being elected in a group representative constituency from Western UP? And a real weaver, a traditional artisan, handloom, handicraft. Many people don't know this. Do you know where the name Sone Ki Chidiya came from? It came from Vasco da Gama. Because when he came to India, he was so amazed by the work we were doing with silk, with cotton. 500 years ago, handloom was 40% of our GDP. Today it's not even 4% of our GDP, handloom. So we need to have different voices in parliament, in politics. We need labor activists, NGO activists, agriculturists, artisans, lawyers. In fact, we have too many lawyers in parliament. We can have a few less. And how can you increase public participation in policy and governance? See, everybody knows that public participation now is very little. The system is very centralized, getting increasingly more cut off from, the poorest amongst us. So I just want to give you a couple of examples. In Morocco, King Mohammed VI saw what had happened with Colonel Gaddafi. He saw what had happened with several other leaders, and he didn't want to go down that road. And so when lots of young people started agitating, he said, "What do you want?" And they said, "We want a constitutional monarchy." He said, "Okay." So they made a site called reform.ma. It's francophone, they speak more French and Arabic. And essentially, they got people to give them suggestions on an open data platform. And they collated them. Most of them were repetitive. So they got about 128 suggestions, and they incorporated 80% of them. They were all given by young people like yourself. And when the vote came, 99.6% of people supported the new constitution because it was representative of people's aspirations. So if you listen to people more often than not, you will go right as a country. In Italy, there's something very interesting that's happened. It's called Monithon, which is citizen monitoring of public projects. India, we have a massive corruption problem, from time immemorial. And why is that? Because the decision-making process and the layout of that process is opaque. So for instance, let's say you have a road being built outside this university. You will most likely have no idea who the engineers are, who the thekedars are, anything. And if you ask them that why are you putting substandard bricks on this road, or why are you only putting this much gravel, they'll say it's none of your business, go home. So in Italy what they did was, all the money that came in from the EU, most of it was for public projects, dams, roads, bridges, highways, etc. They said, okay, what we're going to do is, we're going to have an open data platform. You must look at Monithon. It's called Monithon, Monitor and Marathon. And so what it is basically, every day the amount that is spent as a percentage of what had to be spent on that project, every laborer that works is written, how much he's paid is written, every bit of information is transparent. If you write to them, by law they have to reply in 1 day. They have courts and tribunals that judge those projects if they're found to be inefficient. If we just made all information transparent in India, we would have an almost corruption-free system. What about petitions? So in England, by law, if 100,000 people petition, you have to have a debate on the said topic in Parliament. And if 10,000 people petition, you get an answer from the government, written answer. We should have this in India. Maybe it shouldn't be 100,000 because we have a lot more people, but maybe we can have 1 million. If 10 lakh people petition on an issue, I think they merit having a discussion in Parliament. If people can have a say in discussion at the highest level, that translates into a real democracy. See, my name is Firoz Varun Gandhi. But let's be honest. If my name was Firoz Varun Shukla or Singh or Ahmed or Reddy or whatever, would I have become a parliamentarian at 28, 29? No. Would I have got a ticket? No. Would I have even been invited here to speak? Probably not. Let's be honest. In India, names open doors. The real challenge for our politics today is that we need fresh blood from non-political backgrounds based on ability, vision, courage, ideation. Jordan has got a ministry called the Ministry for Political Development, and now it's been hived off as its own constitutional body. And you must study this, Professor. And what they do is they go to every block of the country and they conduct interviews. And they ask people who are interested, what is your vision? What is your thought? What is your ideology? What are your achievements? What do you hope to do? And based on what people tell them, young people, 15, 16, they recommend them to different parties based on their own affiliation, saying that we think this person would be a good fit, please appoint him somewhere. Now those people aren't given straight members of parliament tickets, but even if they're given tickets in a panchayat or in a local body, that's a start. You get new blood into the system. We should have a system like that in India. Because let's be honest, most of the young people that you see are just children of former leaders or present leaders. When I was the MP of Pilibhit, one of the things I did was I said, okay, in this Zilla Parishad election, I will only put up people under the age of 40. And I will only put up people who have had no political background, just on the basis of what they want to do for this area. And I took permission from my party, probably the first and last time that I did. I'm just joking. I'm very obedient. Don't believe the professor. He's being very naughty. But the truth is that I put up all these young people, and 75% of them won. Because everybody found it so refreshing that there wasn't some, big-bellied Netaji walking around and asking for votes. There was just a young person. I gave 50% of tickets to girls. I said, just go out there, ask for votes, tell people that what your vision is, and people supported them. So if you take a risk and be a little experimental, I think people reward you for it. Well, most of us here are young people, except me, I'm not that young anymore. But we keep talking about young people in politics. Everybody's talking about young people, young people. But is our politics getting any younger? So the average age of an Indian is today 34. In 1952, the average age used to be 44. But the average age of an MP in 1952 was 46. And the average age of an MP today is 58. So while our country is getting younger, our polity is getting a little older. It's a little concerning. So what is the answer? The answer is you. The answer is citizen resistance. Have you heard of the Chipko movement? It was started in a small village in Uttarakhand, Raini. Chandi Prasad Bhatt, Sundar Lal Bahuguna, they got together and they said, we won't let tree felling happen. In the 60s, No communication revolution, no phones, no internet, no connectivity. Just went from village to village, became a massive movement. UP, because Uttarakhand didn't exist at that time, stopped tree felling for 10 years because of Sundarlal Bahuguna. Look what happened in Bangalore last year, amazing. This steel flyover is going to be built, and these young people got together and they said 1,800 of the oldest trees in Bangalore are getting cut. And they made a WhatsApp group called Jhatka. And I wonder why they gave that name. But they made this WhatsApp group and they said, everybody just give a missed call. And 1.2 lakh people gave me a missed call on this number in one day. So they got emboldened and they said, okay, on Sunday, we're going to form a human chain around these trees. And 16,000 young people gave up their free time on a Sunday and they went and surrounded these trees. And then the government had to reconsider. And they said, okay, even if we build this flyover, we'll build it without cutting a single tree. This is the power of young people, and this is the power of technology. There are a lot of examples I can give you. I give you an example not too far from here. In Medak district, the Malana Sagar Reservoir project was going to flood about 40 villages. And the poorest people, people who were not educated formally, they agitated. First they went on a hunger strike, and then they moved court. And in Hyderabad, the court moved in their favor. And they said that the GO 123 land acquisition order is violative of the Land Acquisition 2013 law. And the reservoir project land acquisition was struck down until all of them got an equal share. It hasn't happened as yet, but it's bound to happen because people power in the end always wins. See, we've got a lot of things going for us now as a country that we didn't have earlier. Look at the RTI. Yale University did a study in Delhi in a colony called Jahangirpuri, where they got four groups of people, and they said, okay, we're going to test how soon you get your ration card. So one group were encouraged to pay a bribe, one group to file an RTI along with their request, one group to do nothing, and one group to give a letter from a local NGO. 11 months it took, this study. The group that did nothing and the group that just gave a letter from an NGO had not got their ration card in 11 months. And both the people who paid a bribe and who gave an RTI, who filed it, got it within 3 weeks. So there are strong weapons that we have. There is the judiciary, there is the local media, there is PILs and RTIs, and these are significantly bigger fortifications than our previous generations had. You know, we all think about how tough life is. There isn't a person sitting in this room who doesn't think that they've been dealt a hard hand by life. When I was in Telangana last, I was at the Srinidhi group of institutions, Professor Mahe. I came across an amazing example of a person called Shrikant Bola. Shrikant was born completely blind, and in a village called Sitaramapuram. And he wanted to study science. And they said, no, you can't study science because you're blind. So how are you going to do the experiments, etc.? So he went to court, and the court ruled in his favor and said, you can study whatever you want. He studied science, and he topped the state of Andhra Pradesh. That time it was a united AP. Got 99%. After that, he applied to IIT, and he got in. But they wouldn't let him go there because they said, how are you going to live on campus? How are you going to eat? We don't have the provision to give you a permanent minder. Sorry. So he actually applied to MIT. And he was the first Indian to get a full scholarship at MIT. And he got a gold medal there, astrophysics. And then he was asked by NASA, by Apple, by HP, by Oracle, by Microsoft, by everybody. So come and work for us. He said, no, I'll go back to my country. And he came back and he started a company called Bolland Industries. Today it's a 500 crore rupee company. And 75% of people who work for him are either blind or severely disabled. A person who was robbed of his light gave light to thousands of people. I travel across India. I'm writing a book on the economic future of Indian villages. I've come across a lot of hardship. Now, I used to think, Professor had said I was accused of a hate speech. It was the most ridiculous case you'll ever find. Out of the 51 witnesses that you said didn't show up, 28 of them were found not to exist on this planet Earth. There was nobody by that name. The so-called speech was shown 6 months after it was made. What was it doing in 6 months? I sent it to the Hyderabad Forensic Science Laboratory. There was a 0% voice match. The person who spoke had a very deep voice. I wish I had a very deep voice, let's be honest. But, and I was put into jail under a terrorist act. And, you think about things in life. Life is a great equalizer. And of course, I was acquitted, and the UP government had to apologize to me, and all that. But that's not the point. The point is, India has got the bravest people you'll ever find anywhere. When I said to a judge in that case you're talking about, I said, how could 51 people give their testimony in 45 minutes? So that's what they said. In 45 minutes they gave their testimony. In India, 51 people take probably 10 years to give their testimony, to be honest. And they gave it in 45 minutes. I asked the judge, is it possible? He said, no. Look, all of us have a stake in the future of this country. I was in Bundelkhand a month ago. I went incognito. I asked a farmer, how do you till your land? Do you have a tractor? He looked at me as if I was nuts. I said, okay, do you have a bullock? Aap pe bail hai? He said, no, I don't have a bullock because it costs 200 rupees a day to hire. So I said, how do you till your land? He showed me the charpai that he sleeps on. And he says, I crouch and I tie that charpai to my shoulders, and that charpai drags behind me, and that's how I till my land. And I watched him dumbfounded for an hour doing that. And I told him that all the royalties of my book will go to your family. In Uttar Pradesh, I didn't just give my salary to farmers. I gave 1.5 crore rupees because by God's grace, I'm able to do that. But we raised 28 crore rupees for farmers who are on the verge of suicide to absolve them of their debts and to make an economic plan for them so that they don't fall back into recidivism. But these are small things. This is no favor. That's what I was elected to do. My point to you before ending is just this. Politics is not the other. There is a paradigm shift now. Decentralization is happening. It will happen more. It's a natural process. It can't be stopped. We live in an age of unprecedented information exchange. Everybody is in touch with everybody. Everybody knows everybody. Participate, have your say, get in touch with people like me who value people like you. I'm on Twitter. My account is Varun Gandhi 80. Get on Twitter. Tell me what issues I should take up in the next Parliament session. One of you may have an interesting idea. All of you may have an interesting idea. Tell me what private members' bill I should put. I'm putting a private members' bill in this session. You're going to read about it. It says bureaucrats who retire cannot, by law, do private practice in the business or in the to do with the ministry that they were working in for 10 years. Today, what's happening? I'm a defense ministry bureaucrat. I take premature retirement, go and work for a weapons manufacturer as a consultant. I'm the head of a I'm in the finance ministry, head of a private bank. I go and work for a company and ask for loans in the same bank before my junior. I'm Joint Secretary Petroleum. I go and work for a large petroleum company that should go unnamed. This is not how things should be in a country as vibrant and as intellectually rich as India. I'm not in politics to win elections. I'm in politics to push the boundaries so that people like you and your children and my children can have a greater say, can have an equal say. I'll end with an African proverb, which is, if you want to go fast, walk alone. But if you want to go far, let's all walk together. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Firoz. So, you are audible. It was indeed a very, very great lecture. And takeaways, of course, if you talk of bravest people, I am ashamed of Indian men. These are young women who are fighting the system. Young Indian women journalists are fighting the system. Yes, you are right that what to say of whips, even constitution drafting when it was undertaken by the Constituent Assembly, some very important provisions were drafted through a whip.
Correct.
So even in the drafting of the constitution, you are talking of citizens' participation. One, that our constitution was never referred for any referendum. We could have done it in 1952, waited for some more time when the first parliamentary election was held, but we never did it. In the amending process of the constitution also, we have no say for the people. So people can't initiate any amendment in the Indian constitution. People's resistance are important, but many a times farmers are, state will order police firing against them, and even our courts are guilty. So you know how Medha Patkar was punished even for contempt of court. So we live in very, very difficult time, but I see bright future for the country if we have young, educated, sensitive politicians like you. So thank you very much on behalf of the university. We look forward to welcoming you again. And I will now request Siddharth to conduct the question answer session.
Sure, I'll stand up for that.
No, you can say no. Yes, Siddharth.
Can we have a show of hands to those who want to ask questions? Okay, we go from here in this order.
Should I just conduct it?
That's fine. I know the names.
Sure. What's the time? Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Varun. There is at least one other Gandhi.
What's your name?
Sorry, I'm Professor Satyakiran. I'm a business school professor. I'm also a research fellow at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. In jest, in a very lighter vein, there is at least one other Gandhi who needs to be tutored in public speaking by you. Super
question.
articulate, absolutely articulate. I have a twofold question. Number one,
Please.
is this is an anecdote. Apparently, Winston Churchill had told FDR in the 1940s that the Americans always do the right thing, but only after doing everything else. I hope the same does not apply to India. For about a year, we have been we have made a lot of sacrifices. You know what happened in the wake of demonetization. You know what happened with the rushing through of GST on July 1st. The question I have is, while it's easy to talk about change from behind a lectern, the reality of Indian politics is something which is very, very, it's a different animal. It takes more Varun Gandhis to make a change. The question I have is, I'll give you two experiments in politics. One is AAP in Delhi, and one former IAS officer right here in Telangana, Jayaprakash Narayan. He had to disband the party because he just could not. Yeah. So the question is, the question I have is...
I think you should give a lecture.
No, it's okay. So the question is, I want...
Just a small housekeeping rule in the interest of giving more people a chance. Let's ask pointed questions.
So,
there is some time for private engagement.
Yeah, I think I understood what the professor was saying. Yeah, of course, it's very difficult. It's not easy. Look, what I feel is, let's not arrogate to ourselves a sanctimonious role of holier than thou, or as people who are avengers, or people who are out to improve things. No, there is a role for the citizen. The word citizen is a very powerful word. For women to become voters in this world, it has taken too long. For African Americans, for minorities, for immigrants, for non-landowners, it has taken centuries to become voters. It has taken centuries to find a voice. The way to do this is not to look at it as a people-centric exercise. The way to do it is to build institutions which are independent of people and larger than them. And if certain look at the Election Commission. Let's be honest. Somebody's phone is ringing. Could you put it off, please? It's very irritating. Thank you. Somebody really, really wants to speak to you. It was nice background music, though. Sorry. So what I was saying was that, now I've forgotten, my chain of thought is a bit broken. But what I was saying is that when we look at the Election Commission, before Mr. T.N. Seshan came, nobody really knew about the Election Commission, right? But one man gave that institution teeth. So my point is, yes, people make institutions what they are, but inherently, intrinsically, institutions have to be so large and so gargantuan and in your face that even if you want to override them, it's increasingly difficult to do so. So that is the future. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Hi.
sir, I'm Shubham Tiwari from second year. Sir, if we trace the linkages of the Gandhi family to Panditji and Indraji, you belong to Kashmiri Pandits. The family has a linkage from that. And the community itself is living a refugee life in their own country from 27 years. So I would like to ask you, what made Varun Gandhi to write in favor of Rohingya Muslims, going against the BJP, going against the party, and going against the government?
Okay. It's a very good question, but it's completely absurd. No, wait a second. But the young man has a lot of courage and a lot of spunk. I like it. Okay. The two things have no complementarity to them. What do I mean? When I talked about the Rohingyas, what did I say? I said, keeping national security in check, keeping national security protocols in play, do a case-by-case analysis of them. If you find that they are not a grave threat to India, as some people may have suggested, then give them asylum. Why did I say this? I wrote about national asylum policy in a very detailed article in Outlook magazine 3 or 4 years ago. A much more detailed article than this. We don't have a national asylum policy in India. So every case is treated in an ad hoc manner. Now, what happens when you treat things in an ad hoc manner is political partisanship comes to the fore. My problem is when people like you say कि भाई हिंदुओं को न्याय नहीं मिला तो मुसलमानों को न्याय क्यों मिलना चाहिए? What? One second. Can I ask you a question? Have you done anything for Kashmiri Pandits? I'll tell you what I have done. I went last year to Nagrota. Nagrota is a small place near Jammu. And it is a very big Kashmiri Pandit settlement. And to be honest, Tiwari ji, they were living in squalor. They were living in absolute misery. And I took 6 other MPs with me, but we did not have press conferences and we did not call, newspapers. And we said each of us are well off and we'll each adopt 10 people here, 10 people, and we will fund their further education. But the problem is, in an increasingly polarized atmosphere, there is always a victim. Sometimes that victim is a Kashmiri Pandit, sometimes that victim is a Christian, sometimes that victim is a Rohingya. The answer to this problem is to cool tempers down. Because when you pit yourself oppositionally against somebody, there is always somebody who loses, right? My 2 bits on this are very simple. 1, have a national asylum policy in place as a country which is applicable to everybody. And 2, see, when we go outside our country, we talk about Gandhiji, we talk about Buddha, we talk about people like that. On our borders, if we have 50,000 people who are surely going to die, should we have a humanitarian view of this? Look, my take on this, firstly, I want to tell you, my stand is not against anybody. It's not against BJP, it's not against Hindus, it's not against Kashmiri Pandits. My stand is a very basic humanitarian stand, and I haven't even said anything that big. All I've said is, keeping national security interests paramount, do a case-by-case analysis, see if there are any wrong elements in there. If there are some wrong elements, don't let them in. But if you find people are innocent people, farmers, laborers, weavers, and they are truly in a miserable position, they are homeless, they are landless, they are going to be attacked, then please consider taking a humanitarian view. I don't think there is anything controversial in what I'm saying. Yeah, sorry. The gentleman there. The lady, yeah. I can hear you, it's okay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sarla. I'm a third-year student here at NALSAR. So I have a question. I think you made a really interesting point on how one of the reasons for this general shift towards a more a global shift towards a more populist ideology,
Yeah.
whether it's in the United States or India or with Brexit.
Anywhere.
I think you made an interesting point on how that's a reflection of the working class or sections of the working class revolting against elitist liberal ideas and globalization. However, another side of that could be that that very revolt is in fact a reflection of oppression that's been happening over centuries towards minorities by these groups, and in fact it's a fight for equality which is perceived to be
But
a
it's
fight
the
for oppression.
majority that's voting, don't you understand?
No, it is. But my question is, you have this opposite side where you have this perception that it's not oppression at all, but it's in fact oppression on the other side,
Sure.
which is where the discontent happens.
Correct.
So my
Which is
question
also what I said.
Sure, yeah. So my question is, when you have that nexus, how can we, especially as young people, in the face of social media, where it becomes difficult for us to engage with various viewpoints, how can we sort of engage better, engage in a way where we're able to engage with different groups?
Just
and find a
issue-based
middle ground?
politics, that's it. Just issue-based politics. See, what I say is that forget the politics of your statement. Just look at the veracity of it. Look at the verisimilitude of it. Right? Look at the truth of it. Look at it in terms of fact. Have you read Marcus Aurelius? You should read Marcus Aurelius. Read Meditations. All of you must read it. Look, all things in abstract philosophical syntax appear good and bad. But in factual syntax, it's very clear what position you're making. My point is, see, today I did a tweet, okay? And I'm not technologically savvy at all. I had to ask somebody to put it on there. And I said that I have a daughter, a very small daughter, who's constantly got respiratory problems. So I wrote that as a father of a young girl who's got pollution-induced respiratory problems, this Diwali I'll be planting 15 trees instead of bursting firecrackers because I want to be part of the solution and not the problem. A lot of people applauded it, but a lot of people criticized it. Because like our friend Tiwari ji here, they thought it was an anti-Hindu thing I was saying. Of course it wasn't. Now you have to be nuts to think that, right? All I said was, the air is unbreathable in Delhi. It's literally unbreathable. So let's not, burst firecrackers. Already we can't breathe in the pollution. Let's plant a tree, hopefully protect our future generations. But if somebody is going to come at me saying this is against our tradition, what can I say? Sati used to be a tradition. But the only thing I will say is this. If we just stick to the facts and the issues, see, the press is here. Tomorrow if they misreport what I'm saying in a controversial manner, it's unfair to me. Because not one thing I've said here today is against party discipline, is against anybody, is against, any formal intellectual line. But I can't stop somebody else saying something, right? Or writing something. You just do your best and hope for the best. So you have to put forward a cogent position. And let me be honest with you, if people attack you, most people can see those guys are crazies anyway, right? So it doesn't really matter. I just want to take one or two questions more because my throat is going to give way and I have to go to Shillong for a lecture tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. Very good question. कौन सा गांव है आपका?
Of this excessive food supply. Second, the first one, distributing freebies in the election manifesto.
I think you've asked two excellent questions. So, look, when India became a new nation, independent, we needed a lot of subsidies to make sure that our infant industries would be up to par with global standards. So we needed a lot of subsidies, we needed to be protectionist. As time goes on, we need these creatures to fend for themselves. But where farmers are concerned, where labor is concerned, where certain sections are concerned, we will have to give them a social protection for two reasons. One, they do not decide the cost of their produce, right? Somebody sitting in a government office decides it. That's not always the most fair system, but all over the world, that is the system. Secondly, they are affected not just by the weather, but they are affected by global factors which they don't even understand. Sugar prices, imports and exports. We imported more dal. Dal prices came down. They were asked to plant more dal. Several things which I don't want to get into. I'm in favor of loan waivers in certain conditions, in certain regions where there is no water. But I'll tell you what I would like. See, when the license Raj happened, the cooperative movement was predominantly in two states, Maharashtra, Gujarat. So they took a lot of the licenses to make things like sugarcane. But Marathwada has no water. So Marathwada should not be growing sugarcane. It should be growing oil seeds, it should be growing bajra, but it's doing rice and sugarcane, which are killers for them. So what I think there should be an agricultural plan for the country, that the government, local governments, state governments, because agriculture is a state subject, should be making district-wise plans for agriculture and telling their farmers that in this district, it would be better if you did this. You have an excellent, now through technology, apps like AgroBook, AgroMet, excellent stuff, which tells you what you can do, what the weather will be in 7 days, in 7 months. We need to have decentralized agricultural planning, then the need for that won't be so severe. Last question. Yeah.
Hi, sir.
Yeah, hi.
Good afternoon. My name is Lavish Garg. I'm a fourth-year student over here. I have two very small questions. One, we today heard you and have been hearing Mr. Modi ever since on the need for bringing more transparency in political funding. However, we see your government only refusing to bring political parties under the purview of RTI, retrospectively amending foreign funding to avoid litigation, removing the cap on corporate funding, and even not disclosing whatever corporate funding has been happening.
Sure.
So what are your views on it? And second, do you think the government has lost a certain moral stand by outrightly absolving Mr. Jaisha of whatever investigation has happened?
No.
Thank you.
See, I'll take the two questions. The first question is that my views on the former, I laid out over 1 hour. So I've already answered that question. Political parties will inevitably move towards transparency because that is the mood of the nation. It may take 5 years, it may take 10 years, I'm very optimistic. Second question is, the answer is, don't hang someone out to dry without evidence, without giving them a fair this thing. So I don't want to speak about people, but my broad generalization is, just because one person has written an article does not make a person guilty. It does not make them guilty. I'm not defending anybody, I'm not attacking anybody, I'm not speaking about one person here. My point is philosophical, which is everybody needs to have their say. If there is any discrepancy, then that is a different matter. But just because one person has raised a finger against somebody does not make anybody guilty. So my point is, let us not tarnish the future of one young man or any man or any lady for that matter, just because somebody has said one thing or media has shown it. You and I both know that media can often be wrong. Their interpretations can sometimes be incorrect. So my point is, let us not take any absolutist position. Let's look at any particular instance. As I said, I'm not speaking about this instance. Any instance in its entirety, pluses or minuses, sooner or later, everything becomes transparently known. Thank you.